how are you contributing to sales? How are you contributing to marketing? And that's really what matters at the end of the day here. Welcome to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. And today I am talking to Matt Bohn. He is the field marketing manager at Tynes. And we have a cool conversation. We're going to talk to you about streamlining and scaling when you're walking into a new event marketing role, or even if it's an old one and you kind of have to repurpose, reprocess, and get things on track. Matt's a very process-oriented guy. So we're going to kind of drive the conversation that way as to when you step in to a role at a corporate event marketing company, whether you're in charge or whether you're taking over the reins, what do you do? Where do you start? And then we'll dive into some more detail there. So Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this. Good to have you on here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Let's get to it, man. Let's just start from the beginning, right? Like, let's say you walk into a new role, right? The company brings you on, to be the field marketing manager, to be the director of events. There's all different titles for this stuff. How do you assess where you start? Because I think that's a big thing. You get into a company, right? And you're like, okay, you're trying to figure out the ins and outs, but you don't want to just roll in with a machete, right? And just start going nuts. You want to figure out okay, how do I get my bearings here? So how do you assess where to start with the event program?
Yeah. And there's also a lot of politics behind that as well, where you can't walk in right away and change everything. So, had some experience doing this post-pandemic working in tech. So bounced around a few times, but I think really what I do is, one, if you have a good boss that has a nice onboarding document, you'll have the initial technology that you need. I know there's more you'll find out that you have your access to. You're going to have to pry to figure out what it all is, but I always try and list out all the technology. That's always not the first thing that people think about. But what do you have? What are your options? Are you logged into everything? And then what I do is I really like those listening tours that you have in the beginning. There's always a list of, here are the people you should meet with. I feel like the list is never long enough. So when I'm meeting with people, really what I do is I make sure it's an editable document. I go in and I start adding people. I've had so many managers say, why are you meeting with this many people? Stop, you're going to burn yourself out. It's like, I need to know the nuance of, okay, well, I've talked to this legal person, but I'm never going to work with them. It's good to know who they are. Go meet with this person. This person owns the process. This person owns the form you'll fill out that's going to review your contract, whatever it may be. And I also really kind of like to have those icebreakers. Every time you meet someone on a new job, where are you from? What do you do? What's your role here? I try and get a little bit personal and make them talk about themselves a little bit more, because I always like to say, what is broken in this role? I'm new here. I'm not going to tell anyone what you say to me, or maybe I will if it's a big issue, but what can I fix? What is not working right now? And once you get people talking about themselves and you ask that question, 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh, listen, I need help with this. I don't understand how to do that. So those are the things I really like to build out first, is I need to build that understanding of what's going on and what technology do I have and who are my contacts.
Yeah, I like that you started with the technology, because those are your tools, right? So getting acclimated with what people are using, whether it's a Slack, right? What's the MarTech that's being used that you have to jump into? There's always a lot of different tools, right? There's probably tools that are underused, tools that I don't know about overused, but essentially good to get a start there. The second thing I really like that you said was, what's broken? I think that's such a good question when you're going through and talking to people. And it's basically just trying to figure out where are you struggling? Where are disconnects that maybe you see that you're dealing with every day that I may touch upon? Because then essentially you're kind of jotting those down. And I think it's a good, quick way to make friends. Number one. Two, it also, if you talk to 7 people or stakeholders, leadership, peers, whoever, and you start to understand where people think things are broken, you can kind of start to hone in on exactly where you need to maybe, investigate first and say, okay, this potentially could be a problem down the road.
And sometimes it's the person's just unaware that there is a solution for that. And I would be unaware of a new person. So I like to use that. I get to play dumb for the first, few weeks. Technology side too, use that first 30 days to, if there's a technology you haven't used yet, I had not used Looker before I came to Tynes. I'd heard about it. We just never had. Luckily, they gave me access, and those first 30 days, I used that to go, hey, I'm going to do some training on this. I'm going to go in, do that as well. Learn the technology, at least the basics, enough that you can get done. So that's another thing that I recommend.
A huge topic that we end up talking about all the time with event marketers, event managers in this space is stakeholder alignment. It always comes up. It's always a frustration from the event side of things, and it works both with stakeholders and also works with peers, right? And it's typically in sales, it's typically in marketing, and then it's typically with leadership or executives. What's been your experience when you get in the door somewhere and you start working and getting acclimated with how to sort of start to gauge, is there alignment throughout this organization when it comes to events, right? Is there not? Who can I go to? And can I get alignment?
I think what naturally starts to happen is if you come in and you are that person that is hungry to build process and fix things, people naturally kind of gravitate towards you even more so, like, hey, what's going on with this? You'll be in meetings, someone will slack you. This is wrong. Why are we doing this? Build that rapport. And I feel like I'm
Yeah.
that person where that's not correct. You need what's going on here. So in terms of like getting buy-in and building out those stakeholders, really what I try and do is once I've built that understanding, let's say during that time where I say, what's going on? I'm giving people back the information. Hey, I know we talked about X, Y, and Z. You said that there wasn't a process for this. There is actually one. Here it is. Or, hey, by the way, I have gone out there. I have fixed this. Here's how we're doing this now. But I want to make sure, every time I'm doing it, I always make sure who are the people that really just need to be in the room. Not those extended teams. I don't like putting 15 people on a call just to fix a gifting campaign, right? Like
Yeah.
that's not going to help anyone because everyone's going to have a voice. I don't like this and I don't like that. I feel like everyone
Wasted meetings are the worst with too many people. Yeah, I
I
know.
want to give people that voice. So, one of the things, and I say gifting campaign because we just rolled out something, we just revamped it. And it was funny because I wanted to make sure sales had a voice because they're the ones using it. They're the ones that have to,
Yeah.
I need their buy-in. We were also somewhat bringing the budget down just because when you're
Hmm.
doing a campaign, it can get super expensive. So I was like, all right, I gotta make sure I solve for that. So I was working with the teams, working to get all the documentation, building out everything. But we had sent out a survey asking sales, hey, what do you like of these different items? They were super excited to be engaged. We're like, oh, I actually get to help pick it. And then what we did, I wrote my presentation. I love WIFM, what's in it for me. Every time I presented to a different team, whether it was partner, sales, marketing ops,
Yeah.
was here's what's going on for you. You don't care about X, Y, and Z. I'm going to touch on that for 2 seconds. I'm going to dive in deep on why this matters to you. So, once you start doing that and once you start succeeding in people seeing like, oh, he's actually being thoughtful. He's bringing
Yeah.
things to the table that are making my life easier and not flooding me with information that I don't want. Obviously, you're going to get the information you don't want sometimes, but I try and simplify it for everyone. That's my biggest thing. Then I start to build that rapport. Then I start building that trust. The flip side of that, and I'm sure a lot of people will say this, is then you get pulled into more and more. And
Yeah,
hey,
you do.
you fixed that. Sometimes I'll push back and say, let me focus on my own area first. And that's what I'll do is I'll be like, hey, let me fix a solution for this. Then we can take that on. If a VP steps in and says, I need this first, obviously pivot, put yours on the back.
Yeah.
Let's run through it. So
I like the idea of what's in it for me, right? When you're presenting something to somebody, and then if you have a deck or you're building out solutions to problems or something that's, lateral across the company, you're able to adjust it to the presentation to who you're talking to, because that is ultimately, when you talk about alignment, that is one of the most concise things I've heard across the board from really good event marketers that are working well through it inside of their companies, is how do you get understanding of what those stakeholders need and then take a portion of events or take a portion of what you're solving and deliver that for them. Right? That's how you get them kind of on your train. And I think the same's to be said when you're creating a pitch deck or when you're selling somebody or when you're, we have a deck on Rockway, right? Like a 12-page deck that says who we are, but like we recreate it in certain areas when we know people need certain solutions that we cover, when we know people have certain needs that we cover. It's the same type thing. You're just trying to speak somebody else's language to kind of reduce friction and get on the same page. It's a good way of doing it. I like that. Talk to me about processes when you come in somewhere new. How do you uncover all the processes? Right? If there's no really like amazing working SOP. And then two, how do you begin starting to change them, creating new ones? How do you get streamlined in events? Because essentially events are busy. There's a lot going on. As much as there's a fun aspect and creative aspect to of events, there's a lot of administrative aspect to events and logistical. So how do you create streamlined processes?
yeah, that can be difficult because sometimes you're not going to be able to change a process, right? Like
Yeah.
I can make some impact. I always like saying that first because you're not going to walk in and the legal team and the finance team is not going to change their entire process for you. I get that. There's more nuance to that. But really what I try and do is I come in and I always have, I have my foundations. Here is what I need in every single program that I have. So it's my basic project plan where here are the things that I need to execute on. And I always have them broken down into 5 areas areas. So it's conception, which is just, hey, we're building the idea out. Then it's planning, execution, either on-site or day of, and then post. And I have mine
Yeah.
there first. And as I'm listening to people and as I'm learning what they do, I actually build out my project plan with their names in it, just as I know as a resource. If they send me a link, I also put that in there. Sometimes I will just start with a spreadsheet because I don't know, I've used Asana, Workamajig, Rike, Monday.com.
Yeah.
I'll put, if they have it and I can do like a private version, I'll start it there. I start building out what the processes look like as of right now. Because I'm new, I'm not changing the boat. And I build everything out in there. I kind of say, okay, how does this work? How does that work? Then as I'm going through it, and I like to execute on what I have. So I'll say, okay, I'm gonna take my new project plan at this company. I'm gonna take it for a test ride. I want to break it. I want to see what's wrong. I want to see what's right. And I start using it. I will sometimes start tagging people in it. And I've actually had like marketing ops people come back and say, hey, I have an idea, because they get all jazzed up that there's fine. People actually really like, oh, you're holding me accountable and I can see things and there's due dates
Yeah.
and I have visibility
Yeah.
of what's going on. So they get excited. So I've had marketing ops come back and go, can I help you automate some of this? Hey, I own it.
Nice.
Can I have it where you need this from design? And once that task is done, it can automatically submit what you need based on X, Y, and Z. And I get jazzed about that stuff because I'm like,
Yeah.
you're saving me time, but also just knowing that template is not going to be right the first time. It's not going to be right the second. It's going to continue to change. So I kind of, when people say at the same time, how do you scale things like that? I need that bedrock of that, the bedrock and foundation of that specific project plan to help guide me where it's like, hey, I'm running quickly. We can pivot easily because, hey, great, this is out, this is in, add this line here.
I think being the person to leverage that tool and build that foundation in like a base or a sheet or something, and then start adding, like when you're the one that takes that initiative to say, hey, for this piece, and again, it's yours, it's events, it's this thing, it's going to live right here. And here's what I'm doing with it. Or that's already the process of the company, right? They use Airtable, they use Monday, they use this. But when you're taking the initiative to build it out and write in the process and write in the step by step and including people where you should be, you're just going ahead and taking initiative to organize things and make things visible for everybody. And I do think, to your point, like people just appreciate that. People want to work in that manner. Sometimes they just don't know it until they see it.
Yeah. And another big thing, when you go, and this is a lot of process oriented, like process and change management and all that stuff, is when, I do start to try and change things, or if I'm rolling things out. And at first I'm always very I try and I'm not overly transparent, fair enough, where people are like, oh, that's what's going on. Because I do think that problem we run into, especially in event marketing, is where people like, I just don't understand where things are. I put a request in and what happens next. So a lot of what I'm doing, especially within field marketing, when you're kind of the face of marketing, is I'm taking time whenever I have my 5 or 10 minutes on their weekly calls, if anything is changing or there's updates, or even if people are confused about something, like, I will come in and I'll say, there was a lot of confusion on our form that we have now. What is the approval process and what happens afterwards? And I will say Tines is a lovely automation technology that they put their form in, it goes to their manager. If they approve it, then it comes to me. I can review the budget, dates, I approve it. It creates the Notion page for me where I'm going to put all the information for everyone.
Oh, nice.
It really populates a Salesforce campaign automatically. Never worked with a company that has anything like that. But the nice part about that is, well, one, no one really knew that's what happened. When I presented that to them, maybe they did and they forgot. It's sales, so they have a million things going on. Just me revisiting that, done. Onward. No, people will say occasionally, oh, remind me again, but it's not that I don't know what's going on. It's, oh, I just forgot. So, being able to make those changes, and once they know, they're like, oh, that is better. There's not as much hesitation when you're trying to change a process. If it's a big, huge process change, obviously, right, you have to get the buy-in, you have to make sure everyone's available. But later down the road, where I was going with this was later down the road, if you are having additional issues and people still don't understand what's going on. One thing, even though I hate it, and I don't know if people call it racy or dacey or whatever you want to call it these days, but just that who's doing what, who's on first, what's on second. I have painstakingly been through those before as well. And sometimes those actually help a lot more, where you can be like, here is the transparency of what your responsibilities are for this specifically. Instead of just having my own project plan, it's also another area that they can go to say, wait, who's supposed to be doing that? Oh, that's me. That's right. Okay, I'm going to take that on. And I kind of use that as a guide point as well. And when I've had teams, as much as they've hated it, they've loved it because they've come back and said, oh, wow, I can point to that and be like, no, that's your role, but I'm here to help with this. And I always remind them, like, it's not you saying you did that wrong, but it's more of the guideline of let's work together. That's on you. We agreed to that. And most people people like, oh, you're right. Sorry. I'll get that done. I'll get it over to you. That has helped me tremendously, as much as I hate putting.
Yeah, I could see that. What about like, I think sales and marketing is an interesting, it's one of the main avenues that event marketers work with, right? So, leads, follow up, the CRM, it's a big piece of events, right? So talk a little bit about process from that standpoint. I have heard a lot of this is an area that I think when it goes from events to leads to customers, follow up, everything that's happening from pipeline movement, right? A lot of companies do it differently. A lot of companies have different processes. A lot of companies have different scoring, grading system, lead pass off, touch points in terms of like how they label things in the CRM. There's just a lot I've heard. What's your take on that? Working with sales, working with marketing, and sort of trying to make sure documentation of leads, documentation of follow up, right? And moving pipeline.
I think halfway through my career, it was good that I had gone through serious decisions training. If you've ever done it, it's a beast. We were pretty much,
Yeah.
I was almost like I was in grad school because we'd have our day work and then like brown bag lunches and homework and all of that stuff. And I learned a lot. I always had told myself when I started, and a lot of people I worked with, like, we don't touch Salesforce. That's a different team. We hand over the leads in a spreadsheet and we're done. That changed when I was at a consulting company where it was, well, now you're driving so many leads, almost as many as the website. We're moving you onto the marketing ops team, and you need to work with them to figure out how the lead process goes and what everything means and what's an MQL and what attribution looks like. And so I think where I've succeeded in what I do is I know enough to speak the language, but not enough to change anything. And I wouldn't change anything within Salesforce.
Yeah.
So I have a special place in my heart for marketing ops. I've sat on their teams before. Right before I was on here, I was chatting with our marketing ops manager, and she's like, please don't speak ill of me. I was like, I love you. You're awesome. You rock. Really,
Yeah.
what I think I do, I like to take things and say, hey, here is what is broken. I can identify as what is broken because I don't think, sales isn't going to come to marketing ops and give a specific example of what is broken. We're able to see it because we're that intermediary between the two. So if, let's say, a lead source, when the upload 9 times out of 10, from what I've seen, the upload can be wrong. So I have to go in and I'll manually update that, but then I tell them, hey, it's not operating properly. So they can make that fix. Or, the one funny thing is I will also review my lead list afterwards, 60, 30, 60, 90. And I always joke where it's, it's very much Parks and Rec, where it's like, oh, you're going to change the lead source, right to jail. You're going to change the contact on an opportunity, right to jail. It's that kind of, doing what they think is right. But also I'm that voice for marketing ops to say, hey, you can't do that because I don't get attribution. Building that understanding with them as well, where it's, hey, do you want to do more events? I need you to enter the information correctly. And here's how you do that in order for us to get attribution. Here are the things that I'm looking for. The more that the leads are done correctly is how much more budget we'll get next year or next quarter. Or this quarter, we might get more. It's funny because I've had finance teams always say that to me. They go, if you can show ROI on your events and you don't have enough budget, the finance team is not going to say, stop making us money, right? I mean, they might say, slow down on spending because we don't see the ROI.
Yeah.
The reverse of that is, look at my events. They're doing well. We're making money. And now I'm out. They'll come back and say, oh yeah, I didn't realize that. Let's reallocate some of these funds and let's push more there. So I've seen success there as well. But as you alluded to, there's always, CRMs and Salesforce. I don't think I've ever joined anywhere where it's just bad data in, bad data out, and we're constant. And I don't do that. I don't say that saying it's anyone's specific fault. Should sales be putting the information in correctly? Yes, but they're also doing a million things and trying to close a deal. On the flip side of that, marketing ops is constantly doing cleanup and trying to make sure the reports. So I think it's just that, are you having that communication and are you diving into the data to see, hey, are there things that we can fix? There are certain things you're not going to be able to fix, but what can I fix? And what can I bring to marketing ops to say, here's where things are broken. Here's where I need it fixed. Here's where the automation needs to happen. And also keep them updated on different things. I mean, if you work, partner marketing is huge right now. And a lot of times within tech, when you're co-sponsoring something and they send you that lead list, and you've gone through GDPR and all that stuff, they have caveats where it's, hey, you can't reach out to people that aren't, like, if it's a net new lead for you, you can't reach out to that person without including us. And you can't your BDR team to reach out to right away because we don't want you spamming our people. These are our leads. We protect them. I totally get that. It was their event. Their name was the marquee on it. So we've had to build out different things where it's like, okay, it has to go to the AE, but after a certain amount of time, what does the system do? Normally it'll recycle it and it goes to a BDR. to start doing that again. We can't have them do that. So we've had to build in technology now where it goes to our partner sales managers. So that's another interesting thing where I feel like we're constantly working with marketing ops and sales and the partner team and everyone to be like, what's wrong? What can we fix? The data's bad, but it's not, it's now because of the automation. Let's start working on that. So there's a lot of nuance on a lot of different things going on. And I feel like that's a lot of our role. It's more than I've ever seen it before.
I think what you touched on there at the end is essentially that the role is growing and it is becoming a part of the go-to-market motion. It's definitely a sales and marketing channel, and you're either treating it that way or you're not, right? And it's super important. A lot of the event marketers that I've spoken to or am speaking to on a regular basis we're being asked to do more and more in that space. It's like, how are you contributing to sales? How are you contributing to marketing? And that's really what matters at the end of the day here. When it comes to that communication that you were describing, are there certain processes that you've put in place for leads and filtering them, the information that's being input, or one of the things I heard you say was how important the communication is, right? Just making sure there's open communication and that sales and marketing knows that the event person, I'm on this. I get it. I'm not just planning this party. I understand what's going on at this event and how pipeline moves. But do you have any examples of specific process that's worked well for you?
Yeah, that's always been difficult because, as you said, it's different at every single company.
Yeah.
So it really is trying to understand where that disconnect is happening. Where is that lack of understanding? Not because someone doesn't know it. It's just because it may never have been brought up. New people get onboarded all the time. And especially with salespeople, they're not going to go through marketing ops training, right? They're going to probably say, hey, I already know how to use Salesforce. I'm going to put stuff in. Yeah. So really for me, that communication is using that time during those regional calls to reiterate, hey, this needs to happen this way, or debrief calls after every event that we have where it's, hey, don't forget. I will say once again, and I'm not trying to sell times by any means, but it's also amazing where we have a CSV. I go in, I can drop everything in. It's the exact same fields every single time. There's no pivot tables. There's nothing. That mass spreadsheet that you normally need to fill out when you upload into Salesforce, ours is much more limited. And there's drop downs in there. It's like, hey, what's the source, lead source, events? What's this? What's that? I think really what I've seen success there, I build out the form. We have our debrief. I'm trying to take notes in real time and sharing my screen on all the follow-up things that they want to do. We make our sales team go in and say, if there's any more notes, put those in there. And all they have to do is update the temperature of the lead, hot, cold, we're trying to add warm. And then that's really all they have to do. They don't have to do a ton more. So that has really helped. Also bringing on additional automation. So you're using tools like, let's say, I know this is something new with their in-person, but Goldcast now, you can add notes when you check someone in. So, and that's the nice part about that technology is I can gift someone that event if I'm not on site. So I have a salesperson there. Let's say we just did a suite at Beyonce in LA. So amazing event. Would have loved to use the technology to check everyone. Everyone showed up. But then you can also go back into the list and click add notes to each individual person. When you have that connected to Salesforce, it's already going in. So you have literally no other automation. Once the event ends, it will update member statuses itself. So I really love to find ways to automate. I don't want to have to continue to do list uploads all the time. And I think that's another thing that marketing ops likes about me, where they're like, we don't want to do your list uploads either, because there's just more room for error with that. They love using integrations that will solve for that, where there's less room for error. And, if I'm tracking if there are errors, things move a lot faster. So just keeping all of that in mind and making sure that the processes are super easy. And I'm telling the team each and every time, being very clear at the know before you go, making sure we're discussing it at the debriefs. And then once again, at those regional sales meetings, and bring in experts. I will say I've rarely had anyone within a company when I say, hey, would you mind jumping on this sales team call? I just want you to reiterate X, Y, and Z. Because if there's a problem, they know there's a problem and they're sick and tired of getting emails about it. They're like,
yeah, I'll bet.
I'll jump on that call with you. I would love to present with them. Can I get a couple of minutes? I was like, you can have my 5 minutes. I'd rather take that time than me say, here are our upcoming events. So that worked well at the same time.
I agree with, I like the automate and just kind of simplifying things. I think there has to be connectivity when you're at events, like the personalization that you're talking about that you can put into a CRM. I think it matters so much. So say you're throwing just in the minutia of it, like you're throwing an event, it's at a Beyonce concert in LA and you have specific VIP people that you've invited, that you've brought in there, right? And it's like, there's going to be people from your team there having conversations. They're not just sitting around. So those conversations matter. Those interactions matter. It's the reason that you're doing a Beyonce box at a concert, right? And then essentially But what happens after that? Sometimes I feel like the magic is at the event, which is great, but then the follow up, those touch points in terms of what was said, what did you learn? Do you have an idea for next steps? Like those things all have to be inputted. And like you're saying, if you can streamline that into a system that everybody can see and they know what next steps are, it really makes everybody's life a lot easier. It just does.
And I think, especially given the way Salesforce works and how, so let's say you're the account owner of a company in San Francisco, but you're targeting the CISO actually now lives in Austin, Texas, not in your region anymore, but the account is, so that is still your contact or your lead. So where we've seen success is it's like, hey, great, make sure you're taking detailed notes. I know it's sometimes very difficult. I'm lucky right now because I have a good sales team. Like, this isn't me, but so-and-so, this is their account. I'm happy to take notes. I've had the reverse where it's like,
of course.
I want to talk to my people. And I get that. It's a long time. There's a lot deep conversations. But I do think that on-site ability to take notes is very helpful because you can just drop one in to be like, oh, this person's interested. You should follow up. Doesn't need to be a lot. You don't need to put a lot in there. And that can help your counterparts because Salesforce is already assigning them the lead. If they just have little information or just put not interested, didn't talk to, whatever it is, that helps them in the long run as well.
Matt, how do you divvy up your time and break out, logistics, planning, and creating, right? Because there really are three kind of parts to being an event person. I mean, you do have to create, you have to be creative, you have to utilize your partners, you have to bring things to life, you need ideas. There's a lot of planning involved, right? And then there's a lot of logistics. There's a lot of like depth of detail of logistics of things moving from here to there and having water and this person's sparkling water and there's just a lot of stuff that happens. So how do you divvy up your time? How do you, what are your thoughts on those three elements, and then essentially where you're able to, create processes, automate things, and free up time for yourself?
One thing that I've seen for myself that has worked well, I would love to have like a no meeting Monday. That is not possible so closely with sales, right? So I flipped my Friday, which people don't like meetings on Fridays anyway. So I kind of protect my Fridays on that. What have I not? But I'm still pen and paper note person. I would love to get away from that. But really what I do is, for me, the way that my brain works is I'm like, I know I'll remember that, but I need to write it down as well. So I have to do both. And how I divide up my time, sometimes I will go in when I'm getting super busy and I'm like, okay, I'm going to block this time. And this is when I'm writing my no before you go email for the attendees. Or, once I have this meeting, I'm going to block time afterwards where I can take the information, especially if I'm working with a partner like a DMC to get, hey, we want to do something in Austin, Texas. This is this. I kind of want to digest everything that they send to me afterwards, the pitch that they have, and take them to this ranch and we'll do this and we'll do that. So, it really is just blocking time on your calendar. You have to be able to give yourself that time. I will say my current role, we are event heavy. So I don't really have the luxury of blocking out too much time all the time, but I do save my Fridays. I know there's really important meetings that I have to have sometimes on a Friday, but I never accept one before 10 a.m. because what I do is I go to a coffee house. I have my exact seat that I sit in every time. I put on my noise canceling headphones and I get there at 8 and I just power through 2 hours, try and clean out my inbox, follow up on all, and start rebuilding my list of, hey, what did I accomplish this week? I go through all the major things that I want to get done before the end of the day on a Friday. I have my highlighter with me, so I highlight all of those and I knock those out as quickly as I can. I'm like, okay, these are the things that I want to get done because I want to fall asleep and not think about it tonight. So it becomes difficult, and I wish I had some sort of magic answer other than you just got to block time on your calendar, but we are so busy. I also highly recommend taking time to just keep looking around at things. I'm in Denver and I'll go out and I'll be like, what is hot right now? What are people doing? Much as I hate swag, that's a big thing and it can be a driver. So what are the fun interactions?
Yeah, it can.
Like I was just in an event a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday. It was packed because people were allowed to go and pick the iron-ons that they wanted on their trucker caps. And they got to create the whole thing and everyone was super engaged.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about wanting to do that stuff. So what are those things that are already happening in the world that you can take and you can actually bring to your event that people aren't going to do every single day? It's a little bit different when you work with the C-suite where it's like, okay, I'm not going to have you come and make a hat. That's, you don't want a trucker hat from us. But what are those things that really, because it's hard to impress people these days.
It is.
The creativity part is the part that I think we all love about this job. It's that ability to craft something that's highly different, that differentiates you. And there's so much noise in the industry right now. Come to our event, come to our event, come to our booth, come to our happy hour, all of those things. What are you doing to differentiate and cut through the noise? And, we were just at RSA, and I don't know if you were there, had people there, there noise, there are billboards, there are trucks,
Yeah.
there are marching bands, there is everything. It is sensory overload. You get on a plane, United, the little wind, if you have an in-seat screen, it'll have an ad for one of the companies. It's madness these days. So, how are we keeping up with all of that? And what are all of your options? Like that to me sometimes gets overwhelming, but I also like to lean into it to say, oh, cool. These are some things where, I just read something. It's not copying, but you can mimic sometimes what your competitor doing, but make it your own. That's might be an original idea, but how original is it? Someone else had to be inspired by something. What's going to inspire you? And I found that very helpful work, because I'm always like, they're doing that, we can't do it. Why not?
Yeah.
Why don't find something similar, change it up a little bit? So I really like to protect like I said, my Friday times, and lean into that creative side. I allow myself, when I'm overloaded in the administrative work, to take a break, sit back and say, let's look at Pinterest. Let's go to the mall and see what people are buying right now. Just random things like that.
Yeah. I think the time blocking is a good answer. And another piece I think that goes with time blocking that I've learned over time is you have to understand and learn how you think as an individual. Like, I have friends of mine that are CEOs and running companies, and they can go away on vacation and just like relax and think about work. When I go on vacation, I really don't think about work, and I don't know what it is, but I'm able to just completely disconnect. I don't get brilliant ideas on vacation. I don't have like huge aha moments, right? And I've just learned that about myself. So I just don't set it up that way. But I know how I learn. I know how I think. I know how I articulate things. It took me a long time, but I feel like from a personal perspective, it's helped me work faster, work better, and just understanding like, okay, I have something to accomplish. So, okay, let's say you have this like really cool event that you have to plan. It's this huge executive dinner in, call Napa, because you said you're going to Napa earlier, right? It's on my mind. Well, you don't just block 30 minutes to be like, I'm going to think about this Napa thing and come up with all these cool ideas. Some people can. Some people need to just have it on the forefront of their mind. Some people need to say, hey, can I get you for 30 minutes and have a conversation? Like, Matt, I'm really struggling with this. Can we talk? Like, I want to just spitball ideas, like blocking time and then understanding how you think and how, create and get stuff done. I think is huge for people.
Yeah. Brainstorming with other people works as well. And you kind of have to step back. For me personally, I had to learn that I have to remind myself it's not for me, right? So sometimes I get caught in the weeds of any sort of icebreaker for large groups. I'm laughing because a team that I used to operate, we would always sit there like, can't believe they want to do that. Oh, that's a terrible icebreaker. I think we had done that stuff so often that to us, it seemed super boring. Like, one example is someone wanted to do karaoke at a major conference afterwards. I was like, well, who's going to want to karaoke at a conference? Well, we did it as an after party because we couldn't beat out our biggest competitor because they were 8 times our size and their budget was triple ours. And we got like a little venue, line out the door, people wanting after party drinks and all of that stuff. And it shifted from us at Mandalay Bay getting a little Irish restaurant, like the back room there, to I think 3 years later. And there was someone on my team that grew this. So we were jaded about it in the beginning. She had to rent out the House of Blues because the event, like a massive stage.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
And I was like, what happened that this many people want to do karaoke? But it was one of those times I'm like, you know what? It might not be your idea and it might not be your favorite thing to do. Shut up and try it. Let's see how it goes. Yeah. And then you also know things that will fail, right? Like, I've done that before. People do not. So be open to all of that stuff.
How do you think, having process and automating things, what are like some examples of where like that directly leads to a better event outcome?
Yeah. I think, as we were just talking about, how do you free up time? How do you save your time? That process, having a solid process and having automation built into that. And automation is newer, I think, within our industry specifically, where it's, hey, I don't have to do as much. I mean, it's growing. It's been growing. We got shoved over the tech back in 2020 when COVID hit, where it's like, virtual events are now a thing. I think we were all, oh, I don't want to do a virtual conference. We don't see them as much anymore. But I do think that, using the automation, building out those processes, it's a beast. I feel bad for any team I've ever operated where I'm like, hey, this year we're changing everything. We need to be faster. We need to be able to take on more. We need to do more. And, the first 3 to 4 months of trying to figure out how do we change our processes to be faster? What technology are we using? What asset, what resources resources do we have? I was lucky enough before to have a project manager who's just like, hey, I'm running our program within Reich and your team is heavy project management users. Let's sit together and let's build this out. And we would sit together for 2 hours once a week, knocking out everything that we want. She went through and built in the automation for us. And we did kind of a timeline of what everything looked like that year. And you can see that we were doing our standard tentpole events and there was a couple things mixed in. And once we were done with the automation, all of a sudden you begin to see a spike of the number of events that we were doing. But we were also going bigger. We were being more creative. The team had more time to actually think about the fun things. So like, hey, I'm seeing this happen a lot. What if we tried doing this at the booth as a booth driver? Hey, this is happening over here. Do we have any budget to get a new booth? I think this would be great. And we could actually petition for booths. And now that we were operating faster and reports were running properly and we had dashboards and we could present our success, we were getting more money for these events. So people were like, yeah, we need to go bigger. We want a 20 by 20 and you should have a custom.
It's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that as much of a struggle as it was to get through that and get through that change, and it was just a beast. It was that year was wanted to rip my hair out. My team wanted to kill me. I think once we were through it, now I can explore what I really want to do. I mean, one more on the product marketing side.
Yeah.
I only had time to think about it and see it. And the other one's like, I want to stay in events, but I love the analytics. I love diving into the numbers. I love looking at that. Now, both of them have taken career paths that way post the company. I don't know if they would have had that ability if they didn't have the time to actually see the forest through the trees, right? So yeah, that's always the nice part about it, is you can kind of realize rekindle what you love about the role or find areas that you want to expand into.
Yeah. One question I love asking event marketers is, how do you it's so easy to get in the weeds as an event marketer, right? It's easy to get into the line of like doing, I don't want to call it administrative work. I don't want to call it busy work, but like the planning, the execution, the logistics. How do you obviously that needs to be done, right? But what kind of advice would you give to an event marketer that's newer, that's struggling to get out of that and think more strategically about their events, each one individually, audience, the curation of content, engagement, driving leads, right? Like things that really matter at the event that you're trying to produce results. Kind of like, how do you juggle that and make sure you can focus on strategy?
Yeah. The biggest thing for me was leaning into those resources, right? You don't have to take everything on yourself. I think we do that. I think this industry is just filled with, people who are perfectionists, right? We're perfectionists because of some sort of trauma that we've had from it previously, right? Yeah. I always say, whenever I get together, like SEMA Summit or IMEX or whatever it is, and you go and you're like, we're all bonded in trauma. We're all friends already because we've had something happen where it's like, that's not real life. But I think really, if you're newer to the industry, it is lean into those resources that your company already has. There's probably a person who can help you figure something out. So, hopefully you have a manager that likes you talking to other people within your department, outside the department, but just ask for those resources. If you're struggling, say something about it. Say, hey, not that you don't like your role. I wouldn't say I don't like, here are the parts of my role that I don't like. And as you said, there's certain parts that aren't going to go away. But me as a manager, like, let me go talk to that person, or, hey, why don't you go talk to that person, and have those conversations, because sometimes those areas that you are driving you insane, they can change. One example is we just struggled so much at one point with our legal team at one job that I had. I think they just didn't understand what we did. For the longest time, I will say, like, it was heated discussions on how we were operating contracting at events, because they'd come back and say, absolutely not, we're not signing this. You're not allowed to get this signed. We had to build an understanding with them. And it took a while. And once they built that understanding, then they're like, oh, I didn't know the millions of other things that you have going on. I just thought it was this one contract and you're no, that's just the hotel contract. Now I got to go out and get ground transportation. I have to get this and I have to go that. And like, train yourself on what the areas are that you're struggling with. I mean, I went through a lot of legal training when I first started and it was a nightmare. I hated every second, but it's needed in this industry. So I think my biggest advice is start talking to the people around you. See what resources are already there, because, we only know what we only know. And so until you start cracking that, I mean, there are certain technologies. I've worked at companies before in like 6-7 months. I was like, well, what do you mean that we can build back ChatGPT Pro Plus or whatever it's called? And it's like, oh, you didn't know that? Yeah, just go ahead and put it on your expense card and they'll pay for it and you can get it, the version for however much it is. I was like, that would have been great to know a while ago, but now I do. And that's a lot of time because it's like, create this image and it's only for, an internal presentation. So there's so many different things that you can uncover if you just start talking to people.
That's great. Matt, this was fun. I want to close with a question. I love, I always like asking people this. What's advice to your younger self?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You can do this. I think it's something that I still have to remind myself. You have the knowledge, you're the expert. Let people know that. I live that more now than I think I ever have, but I was so gun shy when I was younger. And I think I was a yes man the entire time, and I hadn't been, but I think I needed that to get to where I am now. So my younger self is just keep going. You've got this. You are the expert, and lean into it.
I like that you can do this. I think it kind of encompasses the idea of, like the idea of effort, the idea of confidence, the idea of like, hey, you're going to have to figure it out sometimes, but you can. You're just going to have to put forth the effort. You're going to have to be the one to push through, be the one to sort of say, you know what, like my thing always, I was thinking to myself all the time as a business owner, I'm always like, well, like there's so many businesses bigger and better than mine. I'm always like, when an issue comes up, I'm like, you mean to tell me that just like there's this many people that like smarter than you and they figured it out? I'm like, no. Figure it out. Let's go, right? Think differently. Go try this. Go try that. It always kind of motivates me.
It is funny because I'll get questions sometimes that when we're doing larger events, and before the event, I'm always a mess. I try and hide that. I don't always do it that well. But during the event, people will come up like, why are you so calm? And I think I've learned at this point, once those doors close, and this do it, once those doors close, I've planned as much as I can. And what's going to happen is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Is this power going to go out in 16 block radius into Embarcadero? One day event that you spend $1.2 million on. Yeah, that's going to happen.
That's a good mentality. That reminds me of, I have a friend of mine and he played in the NFL and I see him at the gym in the morning sometimes. He's retired now. And we're talking one day and he's got two boys in high school. One's a little younger. We're just talking about our kids in sports and like what's going on in sports and like parents just getting thrown out of games and yelling at the refs and all this stuff. And, I said to him, I'm like, he played in the NFL, right? Like, it's like, he's the real deal. And I was like, what's your approach with your sons at sports and at games and things like that? I'm just curious, because his answer was amazing. He's like, man, I don't say a damn thing why they're playing, why the game's going on. He goes, because all the work is done prior. They're either ready or they're not for that game. And if they don't do well and it doesn't go well, then we're going to deal with it later. We can have a conversation later of, okay, we got 2 weeks before the next game or 3 days, or, hey, this is an area where we're struggling. Let's go get better at it. But I'm not going to fix it yelling on the sideline right now. It's not going to work. And I just always loved that approach from somebody that played in the NFL, right? And talking about it's similar to what you're saying about events. Like once it's showtime, baby. Like that's it. You've spent months and months and like running around like an absolute lunatic trying to, catch every falling cup is just not going to, it's not going to work.
Yeah. And a lot of people do want to give you feedback on site. When it's internal, I'll always say, thank you. I'll send a survey out afterwards.
Write it down. Put it in your phone. Put it in a notepad.
Time to remember because my focus is not you. It is the people here and I need to make sure that they are happy. So yeah. So, and B, you have to have a thick skin in this industry. That is another,
you do.
I had to grow my younger self. I had to grow that. And now I'm like, still makes me, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm not going to please everyone. So
nope, certainly not. Matt, thanks for doing this fun episode. Enjoyed talking to you. Enjoyed getting inside your brain a little bit in terms of how you think and, kind of the experiences that you've had.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. It was great.
Thanks for doing this. All right, everybody. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening and hope you have a great day.